after being exposed to COVID-19. And in Texas, after months of staying apart, 15 members of one family have been infected with COVID-19 after spending an afternoon together for a birthday party. Our team of reporters are out in full force with the latest on the coronavirus across the country. Ellison Barber in St. Paul, Minnesota, Valerie Castro in Cleveland, Ohio, and Tom Costello in Washington, D.C. Good morning to all of you. Thanks for being here. Let's start with NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber, who joins us from a hospital in Minnesota, and NBC News reporter Valerie Castro, who's outside the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. Two states where the virus continues to spread at alarming rates. Ellison, now on Sunday, another 7,200 COVID-19 cases were reported in Minnesota, where you are, bringing the total case count in that state to more than 270,000. What kind of a toll is this taking on hospital resources where you're at in St. Paul? How's the healthcare staff doing?
Hey, Savannah, and you look at those numbers and they do not lie. The situation here is serious, and there's no indication that things are getting better. There were maybe 2 days last week where we saw the daily rate of new infections drop slightly, but hospitalizations as well as the death toll has not only risen almost every single day here in the last week or so, it has broken records. I just finished talking to one of the doctors here at Regents Hospital, and he said, not only are their beds and their ICUs filling up and getting close to being in a dire situation, but he says their staff, they are tired, they are exhausted, and a number of people here at this hospital, he said, are either at home quarantining or at home because they themselves have COVID-19 symptoms. And that's one of the big things to remember when we're talking about capacity and hospitals being strained right now, is it's not just the number of beds, it's not just the ability they have to expand their beds. There's a paper plan, which is what this doctor told me, and then there's the reality. And at a certain point, your staff, if you don't have enough staff to treat the number of patients coming in, then there's really not much you can do. And they say right now, not only are they seeing a massive increase in COVID-19 patients, but they say they are also seeing a lot more people who maybe delayed care for other ailments a little earlier in the pandemic starting to now come in. And when you combine those two things, they say things here are really getting to a point where if there's not a massive change in the next week or so, things could become catastrophic and dire. Savannah?
Oh my gosh, and of course it's right as we're heading into the holidays where we might see that spike like we have after other holidays. Now, Valerie, I want to ask you something similar about in Ohio. They've reported nearly 25,000 new COVID-19 cases since Friday. It's Monday, and that's weighing heavily on caregivers there. How is this affecting frontline workers at the Cleveland Clinic? What are they telling you?
Well, good morning, Savannah. And those new COVID-19 cases actually include healthcare workers. Here at the Cleveland Clinic, about 1,000 workers are out right now. They are either home infected and trying to recover, or they've simply been exposed, and now they have to quarantine, that 2-week quarantine period. And we're told that exposure may have come, obviously, from the nature of their work here at the hospital or simply being out in the community. Of course, that puts a strain on this hospital, but other hospitals are seeing the same problem. The Ohio Hospital Association says 20% of healthcare facilities across the state are now reporting a staffing shortage. A doctor here at the Cleveland Clinic tells me that when that happens, other doctors have to be pulled in from different services to help fill in the gaps as needed. That same doctor, I asked her what's surprised her the most over the last few days and weeks, and she says what is shocking to her is to hear that people are still planning those large Thanksgiving gatherings. She said she's heard of people planning groups of 20, 30, 40, and despite the warnings. And so she has some advice for people at home. Here's what she had to say.
What I want people to do is I want them to make this really personal. I want you to think about the 5 people in your life that you care most about. How can you, over the next month, best protect them? If you don't want to be wearing a mask for your own health, think about those 5 people. And if you want to see them next Thanksgiving or the next holiday season, how are you going to protect them? You don't even have to think about the whole community. How are you going to protect your mother, your grandmother, your sister, your children?
Some really strong words of advice from that doctor. And she says, if you feel like you're letting down family members, if grandma is really upset that you're not going to come, she says, blame it on her, blame it on the doctor, so you can make sure everyone is safe. Savannah?
And of course, this time of year in Ohio, as evidenced by what you're wearing, it's not exactly warm. So that's going to be those 20, 30, 40 people likely inside at someone's home. I mean, that's just not what we're supposed to be doing right now. Now, Ellison, Minnesota called on the federal government's help last week to provide additional ambulances to the state, yet another resource that is strapped. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the state asked FEMA to send them 25 ambulances to help kind of really with two different things. On the one hand, it's to help ambulances and EMS workers who are overburdened right now with 911 calls, mostly to do what they call inter-hospital transfers. The goal of that being
so
to just,
one more little question.
Somebody is in a rural hospital and needs to come move in closer for care, that would take an ambulance out of service for quite a while. Say they need to drive 2 hours away and then 2 hours back. That could be an issue when you have so many ambulances needing to go out on calls right now. So they needed more ambulances to help with those sorts of transfers and also to just physically move patients to free up room. I was talking to the doctor who oversees the ambulance services at this hospital, and he was saying they have had to divert some patients. They often will have to do that, but right now they are having to divert some patients because of COVID-19. And the idea behind that extra help from federal ambulances is that they can come and they can help move patients who maybe aren't as critical care levels from some of these hospitals that have big ICUs, more capabilities than other rural hospitals, move patients that are more stabilized out to those rural hospitals and then free up their ICU beds and also their surgery beds and capacity at hospitals like this so that they can make sure they're treating the influx of patients.
Now, Valerie, in an effort to get the virus under control in Ohio, this was the first weekend of an overnight curfew put in place by Republican Governor Mike DeWine. How are people across the state handling this? What's the reaction?
Well, Savannah, as you can imagine, some people are not very happy about this new curfew. And there was actually a rally over the weekend in Mentor, Ohio, called the Rally for Freedom. It was a small group of protesters, no one there wearing masks, but they say this curfew doesn't make sense. The governor says it really is just meant to limit person-to-person contact. The curfew went into effect last week. It means that non-essential businesses should remain closed from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., and residents are encouraged to stay home during those hours, only leave for essential needs like going to work or getting supplies, and that curfew is set to expire on December 9th. Savannah?
Ellison and Valerie, thank you so much for your reporting and stay safe.
There's breaking news overnight on the vaccine front, so let's bring in NBC News correspondent Tom Costello for more on a look at how quickly Americans could start getting vaccinated against COVID. Tom, good morning.
Yeah, hey, Joe, good morning to you. So the short answer is we could see needles in shoulders within about 3 weeks or so. That's the news from Operation Warp Speed. But the headline this morning coming out of the UK is that AstraZeneca, which has partnered up with Oxford University, they now are also reporting very good results out of their vaccine. And so that now is something that could be in the pipeline very quickly. This morning, Oxford University and AstraZeneca are announcing their vaccine candidate is 70% effective in protecting against the coronavirus. That's less than the vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna that have recently showed a 95% protection. But the Oxford vaccine is much cheaper to make and can be stored easily, allowing for more widespread distribution. Oxford also notes the effectiveness of its vaccine jumped to 90% among volunteers given half a dose followed by a full dose.
We will have approaching 200 million doses of actives. So this is the drug substance by the end of 2020, and more than 700 million doses of active by the end of Q1 globally.
The news comes as the federal government is preparing to distribute tens of millions of vaccine doses nationwide. And now the head of Operation Warp Speed says we could see that starting in less than 3 weeks, as early as December 11th.
Within 24 hours from the approval, the vaccine will be moving and located in the areas where each state will have told us where they want the vaccine doses.
Pfizer is now the first drug company to formally seek emergency use for its vaccine, which shows a 95% efficacy against COVID during its trials. Now, an independent committee is pouring through Pfizer's data to determine whether to recommend FDA approval. A meeting is already set for December 10th. Then the FDA makes its final say. As for who gets the first doses, likely those on the front lines, like healthcare workers and individuals at higher risk. By the end of December, the goal would be to vaccinate 20 million people, with plans to add another 30 million per month after that.
Help is on the way. Effective vaccines have crushed epidemics. We can do that with the vaccines that are going to be coming online.
One other piece of news, very important, the FDA has given emergency authorization to Regeneron. You may recall that's the antibody cocktail that President Trump received when he got sick, and he bounced back very quickly. So now the FDA providing emergency authorization for that therapy, not a vaccine, a therapy that's proven to be very effective. Joe, back to you.
Tom Costello, thank you so much.
Now, as we've all come to learn, crowds are a major concern with COVID-19, which means Thanksgiving and Black Friday shopping can be risky business since a large number of people are heading to the stores. So how, where, and when can you shop can make a big difference in staying safe. NBC News correspondent Molly Hunter has more.
With Thanksgiving just days away and more people staying home this year, that means more turkeys and more people cooking.
We've been shopping for the past few days because people are like going crazy and rushing.
The safest way to gather all your ingredients for your stuffing and pumpkin pies is right there from your couch. Fresh Direct, Instacart, Amazon Fresh, and Walmart all prepping for a banner week. And double check with your local grocery store. They might be closed on Thanksgiving, but offering delivery or curbside pickup over the next 3 days. In New Mexico, some grocery stores are now closing if too many employees get sick, forcing people to travel farther for food. But if you absolutely must go in person, keep it short. Bring a shopping list so you don't linger. Check store policies and be prepared to wait in outdoor lines. Avoid peak shopping times. And once inside, always mask up. Avoid crowded aisles and keep your distance.
Everyone wears their masks, and they've definitely made it a role here.
Every year, the crush of shoppers in all kinds of stores this week is maddening at the best of times. But in 2020, it's even more important we avoid the crowds.
I think this idea of the Black Friday doorbuster, that is really being transformed online this year.
Experts say more than any other year, it's Black Friday season, and stores are stressing they don't really want all of us to show up in person.
The recommendation is shop early. If you see something that you want, go ahead and buy it. Don't say, oh, I might wait a week or two, buy now, or you will risk, I think, potentially not getting what you want this year.
And do it online. There's no reason to go see it in person this year.
Absolutely.
And if you're not a big online shopper, many of these big box stores like Dick's Sporting Goods and Bed Bath & Beyond are now offering curbside pickup too. Quicker and cheaper than shipping and still safe. Molly Hunter, NBC News.
Some of the larger restaurant chains around the world are finding a new way to adapt to the pandemic. NBC's Vicki Nguyen reports on what could be the future of dining.
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. The restaurant industry has been really hard hit by this pandemic, and it's also forced a fast forward in changes when it comes to how we get our meals. This morning, we're giving you a closer look at the new digital kitchens that are being launched by some major changes, reminding us necessity is the mother of invention.
One of the great tourist attractions in New York City is the Automat.
You could say the Automat restaurant, popular in the 1950s, pioneered contactless dining long before COVID. Customers serving themselves from a wall of pickup windows. But now, with 100,000 restaurants closed permanently or long-term over the last 6 months, the pandemic is forcing many to evolve for consumer safety and preference. Chipotle announcing its first digital kitchen. No dining room, no one at the counter taking orders. You have to order in advance using the Chipotle app and then go pick up your food. Or you can get it delivered to eat at home or wherever you want, just not in the restaurant. McDonald's launched a similar concept in London, and Chick-fil-A and Qdoba are also trying the ghost kitchen food-only concept to cut down on labor and dining room costs.
Restaurants were already headed in a digital direction. COVID accelerated things, and it accelerated them by a lot.
But for restaurants that provide an actual dining experience, going digital isn't a long-term fix. The large chains are best positioned to benefit, and time will tell if the changes are here to stay.
And while it looks like the idea of digital dining will work well for some of these bigger chains, let's not forget about our mom and pop restaurants or the local establishments where the dining experience is really at the center of it all. Experts predict absolutely people will rush back to restaurants once they feel it's safe to go back inside. But in the meantime, these restaurants are going to need our help. Ordering takeout or even gift cards to give as presents this holiday are all some great ways that we can all chip in and help keep these eateries open. Guys, back to you.
Vicki Wynn, thank you so much. And I think we're getting Chipotle for lunch now, Joe. Now, significant weight gain for school-age children is becoming one of the many negative impacts of remote learning. Here's NBC's Mike Rosenfield.
My kids are definitely gaining weight.
Somerville mom Kelly Rodriguez says her 3 boys just aren't getting enough physical fitness.
The most exercise they're getting is really by wrestling in the living room, which doesn't afford, the best exercise experience. They're missing gym. They're missing soccer.
Flavia Benson says her 3 kids are going through the same thing.
There's been definitely weight gain and just a lack of, mobility, not going around and running around with friends.
And too much snacking in their Medfield home.
We were kind of shocked at the weight gain of 2 of my kids, and it was something that was really eye-opening.
I'm seeing very disturbing trends.
Dr. Mary Beth Mioto is with the Massachusetts chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics.
The health risks of remote learning in children and youth are becoming very evident to us every day.
She says weight gain is one of the many negative impacts of the pandemic for school-age children as they're sitting at home for long periods of time with a limited physical activity and may not be getting highly nutritious meals.
The long-term consequences of rapid weight gain and sedentary lifestyles will certainly be seen for years to come.
Something Rodriguez, founder of Massachusetts Parents United, is thinking about as well.
I'm worried about the long-term effects of weight gain, not only on their health, but their social and emotional health as well.
It's time now for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
CNBC's Frank Holland is back with us. Hey, Frank.
Hey guys, how's it going again? We're gonna start with some holiday shipping news. Amazon, it's offering new ways for customers to track and receive and pick up their orders this holiday season, something we're all trying to really do. Map tracking lets customers view the progress of the delivery on a map in real time when the driver's close by. Share tracking will let you send tracking information to friends or family so they know when you expect your package. Amazon is also providing customers with a 2 to 4 hour estimated delivery window, so you can actually plan your day and not just wait all day for that package. About a third of millennials say they've been rejected when applying for credit cards, mortgages, car loans, and other financial products this year because of their credit score. That's according to a new survey out from Bankrate. Overall, 21% of adults have been denied a financial product this year. More than half of millennials say they've now taken steps to improve their score, and they have an average score of 658, up 11 points from just last year. And we're just a few days away from the official start of the holiday shopping season on Friday, and a lot of us are getting a bit anxious. A survey by Deloitte finds more than half say they're nervous about shopping in stores because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It appears many are also heeding public health warnings. For the first time in the history of Deloitte's pre-Thanksgiving survey, more consumers plan to shop online on Black Friday versus in stores. Nearly a third plan to shop for fewer days overall this season, citing those COVID-19 concerns. So just another way our lives are being changed by this virus. Back over to you.
Oh, yeah, I don't think that a lot of people want to be in those lines you see forming sometimes on Thanksgiving night or wherever to, get an Xbox or whatever. So I think a lot of it will be online.
No stampedes this year.
Yeah. Hopefully no one is trampled in pursuit of video games. Frank, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Coming up, new allegations surrounding Princess Diana's infamous BBC Panorama interview.
Why her brother is among those calling for a special investigation? That's next.
A real close-knit group of nurses who pulled together when their boss needed help battling coronavirus.
You're not just any patient, you're their friend.
These folks saved my life. Thank God that there are people who want to run towards a pandemic as opposed to running away from a pandemic.
White sandy beaches, crystal blue water. How incredible is that? We only get one shot at making the first impression. We're at work, or you will be gone. High maintenance charter guest.
His crew needs to step it up.
New crew? Perfect storm. This is not over. Get back to this boat now. Suck it up. Trim up.
Set your DVR to watch new episodes of Problems Below Deck every Monday after 9.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
Are people there concerned about what impact this could have on the election?
It's news made for your streaming world.
I'll tell you what the American people's mandate is. Heal the nation. It's why he ran. That is why he won. That is the most critical near-term issue managing the pandemic. It does seem as if these state polls massively misled us. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
I didn't know, was my child dead? Was my child passed out?
I just kept saying, please be okay, please be okay.
You rush your child to the hospital.
A woman came in, normal clothes. We get down the hallway. She closes the door. They were accusing me of child abuse.
And that's when the real nightmare begins.
Hey, calm down.
No, it's my children. I can't calm down.
Do No Harm, a new podcast series from NBC News and Wondery. First 2 episodes available now. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
As the Netflix drama The Crown tells the story of her relationship with Prince Charles, Princess Diana is back in the news. The fresh controversy around the princess centers on a landmark interview she gave to the BBC 25 years ago. NBC News correspondent Kelly Kobiea joins us now from London for more. Kelly, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. Yeah, Princess Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, says he wants a full investigation of not just the journalist who conducted the interview, but also of the BBC. Prince William has also weighed in, calling this new investigation a step in the right direction. And over the weekend, a source close to Prince Harry said he, too, is being kept in the loop. Prince Harry, from his home in Santa Barbara, is getting regular updates, a source close to him tells NBC News, adding, "You don't need a public statement to imagine how he's feeling privately. People know how much his mother means to him." Prince Harry was 11, Prince William 13, when their mother, Princess Diana, sat down with the BBC's Martin Bashir to tell her side of the story about her marriage to Prince Charles.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
A new documentary by British broadcaster ITV alleges that Bashir used dishonest tactics to earn Diana's trust, including having a graphic designer create fake bank statements, which Bashir allegedly used to convince Diana that royal employees were being paid to spy on her. A judge is now investigating Bashir and the BBC. Charles Spencer introduced Diana to Martin Bashir back in 1995. He's accused the BBC of a cover-up and is demanding a public apology.
I feel very passionately that I have a role to honour her memory.
Rosa Monckton, a close friend of Diana's at the time, told Britain's ITV that Bashir did coerce Diana.
Mr. Bashir had persuaded her that she was doing a good thing. Everybody was conspiring against her, the security services, and she took it all in. You know, and she was vulnerable. It was a disgusting and disgraceful thing to do. And she did regret it, she said, immediately because of what it had done, you know, for her sons.
Prince Charles and Diana's divorce was made official months after the interview. 1 year later, the princess died in a tragic car crash in Paris. So where do I fit in? Their troubled marriage is the focus in season 4 of the Netflix hit series The Crown. In an interview that aired this weekend, Diana's brother reminding the public it's not all facts.
The worry for me is that people see a program like that and they forget that it's fiction. And they assume, especially foreigners, I find Americans tell me they've watched The Crown as if they've taken a history lesson. Well, they haven't.
Now defending Diana's legacy on 2 fronts. And that interview with Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, was actually recorded before news of this latest investigation was announced. But he has said in a tweet that he fully supports and wants a full investigation. We should also note that Martin Bashir, who at one point worked for MSNBC, now back with the BBC, has not yet commented. An internal investigation back in 1996 found that he did nothing wrong. Joe, Savannah.
All right, Kelly, thank you so much.
A soccer star is scoring goals on and off the field. Marcus Rashford has successfully fought twice to extend a meal voucher program helps feed over 1 million of the UK's poorest children. And his political activism is not done yet. Sarah Harmon has the story.
English soccer star Marcus Rashford knows what free school lunches mean to kids who need them because he grew up needing them himself.
My mum was a single parent. She's got 5 kids that was all living in the same house.
When England locked down for the first time this year, closing schools, Rashford launched a one-man pressure campaign to convince the Conservative government to keep providing free lunch to needy kids, eventually forcing Prime Minister Boris Johnson into an embarrassing U-turn.
It's taken a campaign by 22-year-old footballers to force you into action on free school meals. Have you lost touch with those that you promised to help?
Thanks very much, Vicky. Well, actually, I talked to Marcus Rashford today and congratulated him on his campaign.
This fall, parliamentarians voted against extending the free lunches during school holidays. So Rashford got back to work, drafting a petition that received over 1 million signatures and forcing Johnson into a second U-turn. The Prime Minister eventually pledged an additional £170 million to help the most vulnerable families until early March.
Marcus Rashford, well, another goal in this golden spell.
For the Bates family, the soccer star's campaigning means they won't go hungry.
It really was a lifeline for us at the time when we have no money.
Kathy Bates lives with her husband and 2 teenage sons in the north of England. Her husband lost his job at the end of February, just weeks before the lockdown started. The family struggled to keep food on the table until her son's school told her about the program.
It really was such a good help to have that money. It's a voucher for our local supermarket. We could choose which supermarket we got the voucher for. And we went from there, really.
How did you get the courage to say, you know what, I need this?
I had no option, really. In the first instance, I had no option.
Rashford has spoken openly about how growing up food insecure affected his own mother.
It's the stress on her shoulders that affected her after we had enough. Because she knows she's worried about the situation. She's trying to go to sleep, but she can't because she's so worried.
His efforts have been noticed around the world, including by the Queen, who awarded him the prestigious MBE award. But Marcus isn't done yet. His next project, a book club, sharing the joy and escapism of reading with kids who otherwise couldn't afford it.
Looks like his work's not done yet, too. That's amazing.
What an incredible story. Thank you for that, Sarah.
That does it for this hour of morning news now.
But of course, the news continues right now. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Reiser. You're watching NBC News Now. Developing this hour, top picks. We're learning more about who President-elect Biden is tasking with key roles in his cabinet. No beds anywhere amid a coronavirus spike. We're on the ground in Minnesota, and we'll speak to a doctor about what it's like inside his packed hospital. And the dichotomy of disposable income. While many fill food bank lines, others are ready to spend. We'll explain why and what this means for another stimulus package. Today, President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris are expected to meet virtually with some of the nation's mayors. And tomorrow, Biden will begin rolling out his cabinet. But we're getting word of who is on that list, including his pick for Secretary of State. NBC political reporter Ali Vitale joining us now from Wilmington. Ali, a lot of news coming out today. You have new reporting on a key national security appointment we're likely to see. What can you tell us?
Yeah, a lot of pre-Thanksgiving news happening here in Wilmington after we heard on the Sunday shows that we were going to start see Joe Biden's cabinet start taking shape here because, again, they're suspended in some aspects of their transition, but very much forging ahead on the staffing, personnel, and policy measures. And so just new this hour, we've started to get a picture that Admiral Haynes, someone who served as a top intelligence official in the Obama administration, is the likely pick for Director of National Intelligence. That news comes as as we hear a lot of other picks for potential heads of agencies. I'm going to tick through some of them. We've heard that longtime Biden advisor Tony Blinken is the likely choice for Secretary of State, that former State Department official Jake Sullivan is the likely choice for National Security Advisor, and that in the role of UN ambassador, Biden is likely to tap longtime diplomat Linda Thomas Greenfield. This is a position that we expect in a Biden administration to be a cabinet level position. It's something that each president delineates how they want to use the role of UN ambassador, which roles they want to elevate to their cabinet. But our reporting is such that we think that UN ambassador is going to be cabinet level. That's also true for how it was in the Obama administration. So just a little bit of a sense of how that is going to play out, how they view that role. All of these, though, are foreign policy-facing roles. We're starting to get a sense of the way that Biden is thinking about fulfilling his campaign trail promise of reestablishing America on the world stage. He's clearly leaning into people who have deep ties with diplomacy, deep institutional knowledge of how government works, and elevating them here in these posts.
Yeah, read a little bit more in between the lines of some of these picks right now and how these selections do send that message to the international community.
Well, the fact that these are people who have experience from the Obama administration, one of the things that I've been hearing is that even though this transition is sort of suspended in bureaucratic limbo still because of the lack of letter of ascertainment, they're surrounded by people who have been in these spaces before, because the Obama administration, although 4 years has felt like a long time, wasn't actually that long ago. And so there's not necessarily a ton of legwork to be done on catching people back up to how government works, because a lot of these people have been here before. The other thing I would say is that this group of people on the transition is keenly aware of the fact that a lot of these roles are going to have to go through Senate confirmation, not always a friendly battlefield, and certainly Washington more partisan than ever right now. So they're doing a lot of this choosing through the lens of who will be great at serving at these positions. Metrics of qualification, of course, key, but at the same time, who can get through a Senate confirmation is also something that's percolating in the backs of all of these people's minds, presumably including Joe Biden's.
And Biden's got a busy scheduled meeting later with members of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. What's on the agenda for that meeting?
What we've seen from Biden is forging ahead in the places where he can. So setting the tone on coronavirus has been a key thing that he's been doing over the course of the last 2 weeks of this transition, while also having to try to step up the pressure on the General Services Administration to ascertain the results of this election. We heard Ron Klain, the incoming White House Chief of Staff yesterday, really trying to ramp up the pressure, saying, hey, look, the only job of this agency is to say who the apparent winner of the election is. And in Klain's words, there's no argument about the fact that Biden is the apparent winner here. And so they're very much still waiting for that. But we've seen Joe Biden going out there talking today with mayors later this afternoon, but also having calls with bipartisan groups of governors, trying to really solidify from the top that his priority and his top concern is getting the coronavirus under control. He's inextricably linked that with getting the economy back on track. And so in a lot of these conversations, it's assuring these local and government stakeholders at all levels that they're going to have a seat at the table, but also just simply asking what they need in this fight against coronavirus. We know that cases are getting higher and higher every day. Biden's goal is to make sure that people know that there is someone who is not abdicating leadership on this. He wants to get it under control from day one. It's part of why they've been putting so much pressure on the GSA. They would like as much up-to-date information as they could possibly get on this, but also just to show that they're ready to lead on this issue on day one.
Thank you so much, Ali Vitale. Good to see you.
You got it.
For more on this, we are joined by Jackie Alamany, who writes the Power Up newsletter for the Washington Post. Jackie, good to see you. How likely are these nominees to be confirmed by the Senate in January? We heard Ali say that's a big focus, a big priority in some of these picks.
Yeah, Ali is completely right. She hit the nail on the head here. Biden has deliberately chosen, very moderate, well-established Washington figures who are well acquainted with Republicans and Democrats and have been, recycled in and out of previous administrations already. But I think the Biden team is very well aware that the confirmation process could mark the team's first political showdowns in the Senate. And it comes at a potentially problematic time with the coronavirus surging and lives on the line here. But look, if Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Republicans are able to hold on to their majority, these battles, no matter how, milquetoast and boring some of these Democrats are that are being nominated to these cabinet positions, are going to be fun. huge and explosive battles. Again, this is, McConnell trying to put up a fight here and, gain some relevancy and push back on Democrats using as much leverage as they have here. Blinken, as Ali noted, who is going to be the Biden's Secretary of State, is potentially less of a firebrand and a problem than people like Susan Rice, who became a lightning rod, amongst conservatives, especially in conservative media, after becoming, integral to the 2012 attack on the U.S. mission in Benghazi in Libya and her roles and her ties to the unmasking of Trump aides. But look, at the end of the day, Joe Biden is in a difficult position if Democrats do not win back the majority. He faces pressure from the left for not choosing people who are progressive enough or liberal enough in the eyes of a lot of leftist activists. And then he's undoubtedly going to face pressure on the right, even though we are already seeing some accolades from conservatives of choices like Tony Blinken.
And here we are, another Monday of a new week, and we're still talking about this lack of transition from the Trump administration. So what kind of impact is the lack of an official start to the transition having on things like getting background checks completed for all of the positions that the Biden transition team has to fill?
Yeah, Emily Murphy, the General Services Administrator, still refuses to sign this very important paperwork that would officially allow the Biden transition to commence from a federal capacity in terms of actually making sure that, the Biden administration can get started on fulfilling their job and replacing the outgoing administration. And this is really more important than ever right now for a number of reasons. One, because there's obviously the coronavirus pandemic, which has killed 260,000 Americans, and vaccine has yet to be distributed, and it's going to be a huge endeavor that's going to take the coordination of the entire federal government. But it's also really consequential because the Trump administration has hollowed out the federal government. Agencies across the board have shuttered entire offices throughout Trump's 4 years because the president either didn't see the need for those offices, didn't staff them appropriately, or might have shut them down because he didn't necessarily agree with the mission. We do know that there were a number of offices with science-centric missions that became moot under the Trump administration. So the Biden team has a ton of work to be done, and by Murphy refusing to sign this paperwork and start background processes that can take a significant amount of time of due diligence, which the Trump administration, did not do a ton of themselves. This is problematic for a smooth transition during a time of multiple crises in the United States.
And Jackie, before we let you go, we're going to get a little personal. As we discussed last week, you are recovering from coronavirus, thankfully, hopefully making strides each and every day. But you wrote about your experience. So why did you decide to get so personal with this?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Thank you for your kind wishes. I'm totally on the mend. I'm really one of the lucky ones, but that is why I was so reticent, I think, to write about it. Any journalist, I think, is a little self-conscious about writing about themselves. But also, I am well aware I'm a privileged white person with amazing healthcare and an amazing job and the resources and support system to get over this virus. So I was sort of reticent to tell a story, but I, had a string of interesting conversations while I was laid out on the couch or, half asleep in my bed, recovering with Republican sources who were checking in on me. And it was really hard to reconcile the dissonance between those private conversations and what we have been hearing from Republican governors at a very public level, in dismissing the health guidance, playing down what Tony Fauci is going on television and recommending to Americans to save lives every single day. And getting feedback from sources saying you should write about this because my boss, quite frankly, doesn't believe that COVID-19 is real. And maybe through reading you, they'll change their minds. But I want to be honest with you. I actually had a conversation with a Trump staffer last night. I was kind of nervous about putting this out into the world and thought maybe I should, change course and scrap the piece. And the staffer said to me, if people read this, they're going to think that you're weak because you got hit so hard by the coronavirus. And my initial reaction was, oh my God, I don't want to be seen as weak. Maybe we shouldn't write this. Maybe we shouldn't put it out there. And then 30 minutes later, it really was illustrative to me of just how much disinformation and conspiracy theories and truth decay, as we know, has really taken hold alongside the coronavirus pandemic, and how important it is for anyone, I think, to be able to feel comfortable speaking about their experiences, especially if it might save lives or make people change their minds about their actions and how their actions affect other people.
And Jackie, we here certainly don't think it's weak at all for you to share your story, and hopefully people will read that and maybe think twice about a couple of the risks they might have been willing to take. Jackie Alamany, thank you so much. Continue to get better.
Thanks, Lindsay.
The Michigan Board of State Canvassers, which is made up of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, is meeting today to certify the results of Michigan's election. But the president has been applying pressure to state lawmakers to stop the certification for Biden. Here for more on that is NBC's Heidi Prisbilla, who's from Michigan, Michigan's pride and joy, and also NBC election law analyst Ned Foley. He's also the director of election law at Ohio State University. Heidi, we'll start with you. There was a deadlock last week in Detroit County with the Board of Waste Canvassers. What do we expect to happen today?
We have already one of the 2 GOP members on that board at the state level, Lindsay, basically telegraphing that he's not going to vote for this, that he's going to vote for a delay. That won't matter unless his counterpart follows suit, the second Republican on that state canvassing board, which would then essentially deadlock the board and delay this entire process. But delay is the operative word here, Lindsay, because if President Trump is pursuing this in an effort to pressure the legislature to do something, that dog don't hunt. The legislature doesn't have a role here under Michigan law. They have to actually change the law. So what we're looking at here is a delay. But what I'm told by my sources is if that second Republican actually votes to delay, we should have some pretty serious concerns about what happened in that room with President Trump last week, because that second Republican works for one of the Republicans who was in the room with President Trump. He is the House Speaker for Michigan. And after the meeting, he telegraphed that there was nothing that he saw that should delay certification. Lindsay, just to clarify here, we're not talking about a large pool of votes here. We're talking about a clerical issue that occurs, frankly, in cities around the country regarding ballots coming in and balancing the books. Joe Biden won the state of Michigan by 150,000 votes. So if we're talking about a universe here of 300, maybe max 500 votes where there's a clerical record-keeping error, that is just completely irrelevant. And this would be seen as an over political move here to play into the president's hands to build this narrative that somehow he was cheated out of the election when in fact he lost by 150,000 votes, Lindsay.
It's so interesting because we're still waiting on the GSA to ascertain the results, which many saw before this as simply a clerical task as well. Ned, the president has been trying to apply pressure on these state legislators from Michigan to repudiate the results if they're certified, or even possibly replace electors with ones who are loyal to him. So are either of those options legal?
Well, they're certainly not appropriate. I mean, never before in American history has an incumbent president attempted to subvert the electoral process and basically get a second term that's not justified. And as Heidi said, voted against him in Michigan and in the other states. It's 306 electoral votes in the Electoral College, and that's why President-elect Biden will be inaugurated, but President Trump is trying to subvert that process. It's not right.
Heidi, Michigan GOP State Senator Mike Shirkey, he was one of the legislators who visited the White House, and he tweeted yesterday that whether the Board of Canvassers certifies our results tomorrow or decides to take the full time allowed by law to perform their duties, it's inappropriate for anyone to exert pressure on them. Can you help us? What does he mean there?
Michigan sources who I've talked to, Lindsay, see that as potential cover for the GOP board members to vote to delay this process. He hasn't spoken any more than what is in that tweet, quite frankly. But his statement after that meeting with Trump, again, was that he saw no reason and no evidence to disqualify certification at this time. So, again, we're talking about a delay, but a delay is bad. A delay is bad because this has never happened before in the state of Michigan in the history that a presidential election would have a deadlock on the board after all 83 counties already went through recounted these votes and certified them. The statute says that this board shall certify. It doesn't say maybe they will or they'll consider it. It says they shall do it. That is their duty under the Michigan statute, and it will open them up also to legal exposure. I know for a fact, based on my reporting, that there are any number of individuals, a voter, a Democratic member of the canvassing board, who are prepared to go ahead, file legal action that will end with the Michigan Supreme Court, which will then force this certification. Lindsay.
Now, final question to you. Do you think at any point Governor Gretchen Whitmer can or should step in here?
Well, she has the power to. The electors will vote on December 14 in a few weeks. And the Biden electors, the ones pledged to vote for Biden from the state of Michigan, will meet in Lansing, the state capital, to vote. And then Governor Whitmer can certify them as the correct electors based on the popular vote in Michigan. Again, the fact that Biden won. And those will be the votes that go to Washington, D.C. to get counted.
Ned Foley, Heidi Prisbilla, I think the quote of the day might belong to Heidi, that dog don't hunt. Thank you both very much for your time today. While President-elect Biden continues his meetings ahead of Inauguration Day, President Trump is not backing down, formally asking for a recount in Georgia. On Friday, the audit of those 5 million ballots certified Biden as the victor. But the Trump campaign continues to fight and try and overcome the 12,000 plus vote deficit. Those 5 million ballots will now be counted for a third time. NBC News political reporter Julia Jester joins us now from Griffin, Georgia. So Julia, President Trump requesting a formal recount in Georgia. The audit really only marginally chipped away at Biden's lead. So with more than 12,000 votes of a difference here, what is he hoping to accomplish with another recount?
Hi, Lindsay. That's right. President Trump's officially requested that recount after the state just completed a hand count audit. Now, this recount will involve machine scanning the paper ballots, which does not address what President Trump's trying to get at. He is railing against the state's absentee ballot signature verification process. Now, by law, that's not going to happen with this upcoming recount. And folks here are a little bit overwhelmed in terms of election workers. They've got a special election just next week and a January runoff. So this machine recount, we're told, could start as early as tomorrow, and it's putting a bit of a strain on the system here. Lindsay?
And President Trump's supporters were out protesting there this past weekend. But are there any signs right now of voter, and you mentioned election official fatigue with all these recounts?
There is, and while President Trump's supporters really are hoping that he can change things around here in Georgia, the reality is most folks I've talked to on both sides of the aisle just want to move on, want this to be done with, want to focus on that high-stakes Senate runoff. Here's what one voter here told me over the weekend about the overall fatigue here in Georgia. Take a listen.
Brian Raffenberger said that there was no fraud, and so I believe that there's no fraud. We can't, it is what it is. The numbers don't lie.
It's ridiculous at this point. I mean, there's been a lot of taxpayers' money already spent on the first and second, the first count, the second recount. We hired the extra poll workers as it was because they expected a lot of different, outcomes from the original election.
And as that gentleman just noted, the Trump campaign does not have to pay for this recount. That cost falls on local jurisdictions. Lindsay?
So let's talk about the stakes for the Senate runoff races. Republicans are still fighting amongst themselves by battling election officials. So will it ultimately hurt them in the Senate races?
The Republican governor and the Republican Secretary of State here have certified these results, affirming Joe Biden's victory here in the state. And the Secretary of State even said it's not our fault that President Trump lost. He noted that 24,000 Republicans voted in the June primary and didn't show up to vote in November. And you see the Senate candidates adjusting for that after President Trump was pretty much not pro-absentee ballot, had kind of suggested that his supporters go vote for him in person. You see Senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue encouraging their supporters here in Georgia to really request those absentee ballots and vote in whatever way they possibly can.
Are the Democratic Senate candidates getting a boost from Biden's win there?
Yeah, so, I mean, here in Georgia, if you're a Republican, the message here is hold the line of that GOP Senate majority. And if you are a Democrat,
Georgia chose Joe Biden, but in order for Biden to do anything in Washington, voters here realize that he needs Senate support. And so John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock, the Democratic challengers to these incumbents, are really running as a unity ticket and saying that this is about allowing Biden and Senator Kamala Harris, who will be his vice president, to enact their agenda. And without the Senate support, without a Democratic majority in the Senate, they'll be stuck at a stalemate and there will be no progress.
All right. Thank you so much, Julia Jester, for us in Georgia. Now to the Trump campaign's ongoing lawsuits. More Republicans calling for the transition to begin while stopping short of acknowledging Joe Biden as president-elect. Here's NBC's chief White House correspondent Hallie Jackson with the latest part of that story.
Thank you very much.
Two key deadlines today set to deliver two more blows to the president's push to deny the election results, with Michigan and Pennsylvania both ready to officially certify their vote totals, showing Joe Biden as the winner, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie slamming the Trump team.
The conduct of the president's legal team has been a national embarrassment.
Now, the Trump campaign's trying to distance itself from controversial attorney Sidney Powell. Powell's among those pushing a convoluted conspiracy theory claiming an international plot involving, in part, a dead dictator led to stolen votes.
That's when they came in the back door with all the mail-in ballots, many of which they had actually fabricated.
There's no evidence of any of it. In Pennsylvania, yet another Trump lawsuit now dismissed. A federal judge, in a scathing ruling, writing Rudy Giuliani and the campaign asked him to, quote, disenfranchise almost 7 million voters in the state based on speculative accusations, adding, this is simply not how the Constitution works. Now, more Republicans are calling on the president to let the transition begin in earnest.
It was past time to start a transition.
Maryland's Republican governor tweeting the president, who hit the links twice this weekend, should stop golfing and concede.
Frankly, I'm embarrassed that more people in the party aren't speaking up.
President Trump requesting a recount in Georgia now, taxpayers footing the bill, even after an automatic hand recount shows Biden leading with nearly 13,000 votes. And in Michigan, the state's Republican chair and the head of the Republican National Committee are asking for a 2-week delay in certifying the vote total showing Biden won there. The move, attacked by critics who worry it's part of a broader push to pressure state legislators to override the will of the voters and give electoral votes instead to President Trump. An extreme and legally dubious strategy the Trump campaign is now openly discussing.
Will it go to the state legislators?
Well, that's a possibility.
And that was NBC's chief White House correspondent Hallie Jackson. NBC's Carol Lee joins us now from Washington. Carol, President Trump's legal team, they have another appeal out in the Pennsylvania case. But what do we know right now about the president's response to some of these legal setbacks and those calls to concede?
Well, what we're learning is that he's really frustrated with his legal team, as one could probably imagine, given the number of setbacks that this legal team in fair election, despite that they've not put forward any evidence. But as far as the president's view, he's been frustrated with his legal team. He doesn't like what he's seeing on TV. That news conference last week with his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and then Sidney Powell, who has since been kicked off of the Trump legal team. The president had tweeted and support of Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani. And then, obviously she was removed. But the president's sticking with his team because, frankly, sources tell us that that's all he's got. There's no one else who really wants this job. And Rudy Giuliani had sort of gotten it by default to begin with because the person the president had initially selected came down with the coronavirus. And then there are others who are serious lawyers in Republican circles who just don't want to take on these sorts of cases because, as you've noted, they are not going anywhere.
Well, over the weekend, the president attended part of the virtual G20 meeting with world leaders, but he skipped a meeting about, of all things, COVID-19 to go golfing. Are any of your sources saying this is a bad look?
Look, we know that people around the president have for months really wanted him to focus more on the pandemic, to address the issue, because it's obviously on the forefront of all of the American country's mind. This is something that everybody's dealing with, and their lives have changed so significantly on a day-to-day basis. But he's resisted that. He hasn't attended a coronavirus task force meeting in months. He's not been out publicly really talking about this, certainly not since the election. He's let that be his vice president, Mike Pence. And, they're pushing back, saying that the White House is saying the president did address coronavirus and spoke to the issue at this G20 meeting. But when we asked the White House for some sort of transcript or a video of him making these comments, they have not responded. So as far as we're concerned, there's nothing that out there in the public domain that shows that the president was really addressing this issue. And as you noted, he was on the golf course quite a bit.
And you have some new reporting on a defense bill that contains a plan to rename bases that honor Confederate leaders. Is the president weighing in on this?
Well, privately, he's telling lawmakers that he's sticking to his position during the campaign, which was that if this annual defense funding and policy setting bill, the National Defense Authorization Act, still has this amendment in it that would rename bases, military bases that are honoring Confederate generals, that he will veto that. Now, President Trump has threatened to veto the NDAA before and has backed off of that. Other presidents, President Obama also threatened to do that. It hasn't happened. It has been signed every year for 59 years. What's different this year is Republicans are looking at the president, seeing his political position, seeing what he's doing with his legal fights and how frustrated he is, and they're thinking he might actually follow through with this. And so their argument to Democrats who also support this is a provision that has widespread bipartisan support. Their argument is you shouldn't throw out the whole entire bill. It includes pay raises for troops and other provisions that they think are very good for the military. And their hope is that a President-elect Biden, once he takes office, would sign some sort of executive order overturning the names of these military bases and setting the policy so that they can be renamed. Now, Biden's team is saying that they're not going to comment on whether he would sign an executive order in that regard, but he has expressed support for this in the past.
All right. Thank you so much, Carol Lee. We appreciate it. We want to take a live look right now at a holiday tradition that continues on in a world where so much has been upended. But First Lady Melania Trump here welcoming the arrival of the White House Christmas tree, an 18.5-foot tree. Right here, you see that camera panning the tree there in the bed of that truck with some ceremonial music playing in the background. And for more on what's going on inside the Trump White House and what options, if any, remain for the president, we are joined now by NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray. Mark, it's always good to be able to talk to you. All of the electors from each state have to cast their votes by December 14th, and Trump's legal fight to flip some of those swing states in his favor continues to be unsuccessful. What options remain here?
The options actually remain more legal challenges, more appeals. I think the broad way to look at the president, his legal strategy, as well as his public opinion strategy, is to always just move the goalpost and just to buy himself more time to be able to question the validity of the election results, as Carol Lee was just pointing out, to sully and salt the earth for the incoming Biden administration and just sow a lot of chaos. And so the president's just trying to buy as much time as he can, but it has been mentioned, and this is really important, for all the legal challenges the president has brought, not a single one has actually been able to substantiate widespread fraud, that these election results are invalid.
And even though some Republican leaders are slowly saying, okay, it's time to concede, we did see in Julia Jester's piece in Georgia, protesters out this weekend. So the president's message is resonating with some. Somebody had a sign that said rigged. But with all of these outlying votes that are finally getting counted, this race actually turned out to not be so close. Right now, in fact, Joe Biden's popular vote lead is 51% to Trump's 47%. And this would give Biden the second largest popular vote margin, with only Barack Obama's 7-point win in 2008 being greater. So why are some Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, still refusing to support these results?
One, the president is refusing to support the results, still claiming that he won, which is incorrect. But also, there are 2 Senate runoffs in Georgia. And I think the early thinking right now is that the Republicans don't want to be divided going into these runoffs. I actually think that isn't working out. We're seeing Republicans versus Republicans in Georgia going against Secretary of State there regarding the election results. But I think the idea is, hey, we don't want to upset the president at all. We want to go in as unified as possible into these Senate runoffs in Georgia. But I think all of it is to try to, placate the president. But as you just mentioned, every single day that goes by, there are more and more Republicans that are starting to have to express cracks in that wall. Whether it's Republicans who say that Joe Biden is the president-elect, or Republicans who say, hey, let's start the transition process, even if the president can still carry out his legal challenges.
Yeah, and despite the president's best efforts, his plan to get state legislators to change their electoral vote doesn't seem to be working. Local Republicans in state after state, they say they continue to support the people's vote and the will of the people. So do you get the sense that the president thought he could sway those leaders and that everybody would just kind of follow along?
Yeah, maybe. I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that the president, despite any kind of setbacks or any kind of challenge, wants to continue to move the goalposts. And again, fundamentally, this is a president who doesn't want to admit that he lost. Even after he lost the Iowa caucuses in 2016, he charged fraud and that it was rigged, that no way that Ted Cruz was able to win. Well, he went on to end up winning the New Hampshire Republican primary and the Republican nomination. But fundamentally, this is a president who can never admit that he was defeated, and I think that is really the central issue here.
But Mark, maybe nothing phases you anymore, but seeing those state Michigan leaders at the White House being invited by the president, being hosted by the president under the guise that they were talking about COVID-19, I mean, that's unusual.
It is. And again, take these Michigan state legislators at their word, that they accepted an invite by the president, that they told him that their state needs more COVID funding, and that Joe Biden's 150,000 vote lead in their state of Michigan seems to be irreversible. And so we're going to find out what Michigan does later today, Lindsay. But I do think that there is a sense that a lot of Republicans are worried about crossing the president, but also end up saying that it's really hard to reverse the public will, particularly in a state like Michigan, where Joe Biden has a 150,000 vote lead. And so I think that's the two dynamics at play. You're trying to see some Republicans walk the tightrope, but we'll see what they eventually do later today.
All right, sounds good. We'll be on it. Thank you so much, Mark Murray.
Thanks.
Public health experts are pleading with all of us to keep our gatherings small this Thanksgiving, even as hope rises that vaccines could be coming soon, with another drug maker reporting a high degree of effectiveness. We'll get a progress report next.
A real close-knit group of nurses who pulled together when their boss needed help battling coronavirus. You're not just any patient, you're their friend. These folks saved my life. Thank God that there are people who want to run towards a pandemic as opposed to running away from a pandemic. A real close-knit group of nurses who pulled together when their boss needed help battling coronavirus. You're not just any patient, you're their friend. These folks saved my life. Thank God that there are people who want to run towards a pandemic as opposed to running away from a pandemic.
White sandy beaches, crystal blue water. How incredible is that? We only get one shot at making the first impression. We're here to work, or you will be gone. High maintenance charter guest.
This crew needs to step it up.
New crew. Perfect storm. Get back to this boat now. Suck it up. Clean up.
Set your DVR to watch new episodes of Problems Below Deck every Monday after 9.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
Are people there concerned about what impact this could have on the election?
It's news made for your streaming world.
I'll tell you what the American people's mandate is: heal the nation. That's why he ran. That is why he won. That is the most critical near-term issue, managing the pandemic. It does seem as if these state polls massively misled us. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
I didn't know, was my child dead? Was my child passed out?
I just say, please be okay, please be okay. You rushed your child to the hospital.
A woman came in, normal clothes. We get down the hallway. She closes the door. They were accusing me of child abuse.
And that's when the real nightmare begins.
Hey, calm down.
No, it's my children. I can't calm down.
Do No Harm, a new podcast series from NBC News and Wondery. First 2 episodes available now. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
Count them. There are now 3 COVID-19 vaccine candidates touting high efficacy rates. Today, drug maker AstraZeneca announcing their vaccine in partnership with Oxford University is at least 70% effective and could reach 90% by tweaking the dosage. With more on that and how quickly Americans could start getting vaccinated, NBC's Tom Costello. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Lindsay, good day. The bottom line from the commanders of Operation Warp Speed, we could see needles in shoulders within 3 weeks. That's how quickly this process is now moving. And now we have some very encouraging news out of the UK. AstraZeneca partnering up with Oxford University, announcing positive test results out of their vaccine trials. Oxford University and AstraZeneca are announcing their vaccine candidate is 70% effective in protecting against the coronavirus. That's less than the vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna that have recently showed 95% protection. But the Oxford vaccine is much cheaper to make and can be stored easily, allowing for more widespread distribution. Oxford also notes the effectiveness of its vaccine jumped to 90% among volunteers given half a dose followed by a full dose.
We will have approaching 200 million doses of actives. So this is the drug substance by the end of 2020, and more than 700 million doses of active by the end of Q1 globally.
The news comes as the federal government is preparing to distribute tens of millions of vaccine doses nationwide. And now the head of Operation Warp Speed says we could see that starting in less than 3 weeks, as early as December 11th.
Within 24 hours from the approval, the vaccine will be moving and located in the areas where each state will have told us where they want the vaccine doses.
Pfizer is now the first drug company to formally seek emergency use for its vaccine, which shows a 95% efficacy against COVID during its trials. Now, an independent committee is pouring through Pfizer's data to determine whether to recommend FDA approval. A meeting is already set for December 10th. Then the FDA makes its final say. As for who gets the first doses, likely those on the front lines, like healthcare workers and individuals at higher risk. By the end of December, the goal would be to vaccinate 20 million people, with plans to add another 30 million per month after that.
Help is on the way. Effective vaccines have crushed epidemics. We can do that with the vaccines that are going to be coming online.
One other piece of important news here, the FDA has also approved Regeneron's therapy. It's an antibody cocktail. You may recall that President Trump received that when he got sick and bounced back very quickly. And the FDA are providing emergency authorization now for Regeneron. Lindsay, back to you.
Tom, thanks. So what's next now that there are 3 possible vaccines reporting promising results? This on the heels of the national 7-day moving average skyrocketing this month. Look at that graph.